You can have one neighborhood where there's a mansion and it's a beautiful home, and then right next door there's somebody living in a tin shack. I mean, literally, that's how it is. And I think a lot of it has to do with the corruption. Nigeria is just overrun with corruption on every level. And what ends up happening in corruption is the people who need the help the most don't get it. So even that comes with organizations like the UN and other organizations that bring funding into Nigeria. Everybody takes a piece of that funding on its way down, and by the time it gets to the field, there's very little left to do anything with. And that's the cost of corruption, is that everybody takes their piece to put in their pocket, and by the time it gets to the field, to the people who are starving and need clean water and medical care and all these things, there's just nothing left.
Welcome to Coach Soul, the podcast where we explore therapeutic ways to the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Steve Hudgins. I'm a licensed professional counselor dedicated to helping you navigate life's challenges. In each uplifting episode, we'll discuss mental health, relationships, self-care, emotional well-being, and personal growth. Join me and with my co-host, Kenya Evelyn, a therapeutic life coach, where sometimes we'll even welcome special guests to our show that share their experience and expertise. So let's embark on this transformative path together and discover a healthier and happier you. Hey, welcome back to Coach Soul. What an honor and privilege, Brad. Thank you for coming on last time. This is part 2. And we kind of left off of the darkness that Nigeria is encountering. You know, you're saying these IDP camps, we didn't really explain IDP. So what is that terminology? And when you say camps, are we talking about the nomadic camps or cities? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, basically an IDP camp is an internally displaced persons camp. And what that means is that internally within the country, the people who are thrown into these camps are displaced. And they can be displaced for many reasons, flooding, natural disasters. Most people in IDP camps in northern Nigeria are displaced because of the violence. Northern Nigeria is about 90 to 95% Muslim. It's controlled, 12 of the northern Nigeria states are controlled by Sharia law, a very strict form of Sharia law. This is a place where Boko Haram operates, and ISWA, which is the Islamic State of West Africa, the ISIS of West Africa. All of these terrorist groups control a lot of the regions in northern Nigeria, the areas that we work in. And so they'll go into a village and burn the houses, destroy the village. And you may have 1,000 people or 2,000 people who have nothing. Everything's been destroyed. They need to have a place to go. And so Nigerian government helps set up IDP camps, and they're basically just tents that people live in. You can stand outside of an IDP camp and you can literally see thousands and thousands of tents all lined up. It's just like a field of tents as far as the eye can see. Some of these IDP camps have 10 or 20,000 people who live in them, and they can be, the size of a small city. Some of them might be a couple hundred people. It just depends on where it is and how the camp is set up. But it's a huge problem. But that's what an IDP camp is.
So it's nothing like what we see here in the United States with homeless camps and things of that nature. We're talking a large scale. Yes. But Brad, I mean, when you talk about the Nigerian government just trying to supply tents or things like that, wait a minute, that's confusing. How come the government is not like the United States and trying to make sure that the people are being well taken care of? How come they're not sending in their military like we do here to prevent a lot of this from happening from the people? What's really going on?
I think Nigeria is one of the wealthiest nations in Africa.
Right.
And I always tell people Nigeria is the land of contradictions. You can have one neighborhood where there's a mansion and it's a beautiful home, and then right next door, there's somebody living in a tin shack. I mean, literally, that's how it is. And I think a lot of it has to do with the corruption. Nigeria is just overrun with corruption on every level. And what ends up happening in corruption is the people who need the help the most don't get it. So even that comes with organizations like the UN and other organizations that bring funding into Nigeria. Everybody takes a piece of that funding on its way down, and by the time it gets to the field, there's very little left to do anything with. And that's the cost of corruption, is that everybody takes their piece to put in their pocket, and by the time it gets to the field, to the people who are starving and need clean water and medical care and all these things, there's just nothing left.
So when you think about the disparity that's happening, what is the mental health, or what is the thought process that these people are going through? I mean, is there disparity? Because when you think about the homeless here, many have given up hope and they just turn to substance abuse and they just want to die, that type of thing. But here you are in a wealthy country and you're not getting what's there. What is the mental status of these people in these camps?
I would say that the Nigerian people are absolutely resilient. They are some of the most resilient people that I have ever met. I don't know if that's something genetic. You would probably know the answer to that, but it's certainly something cultural, because Nigerian people can be put in some of the most horrific conditions that I've ever seen, and they are resilient. They will find ways to survive that you could never think of. Oftentimes when I go to these camps, and most of these camps have Christians in them that have suffered persecution. That's why they're there. They are joyful. They are praising God, and they have a smile on their face. And they will offer you what little they have. They'll offer it to you or to me. And it's almost embarrassing to take it from them, but it's a great insult to not take it from them. And so I think that their culture and just what they have been through has conditioned them to be able to handle these challenges in a way that I've never seen a group of people challenged. I think Americans, and I am one, but I think so many Americans have become soft because of our comforted conditions that we've had for so long. It's not true with the Nigerian people. They are absolutely able to handle this in a way that I've never seen anybody be able to.
I mean, I chuckle because being in the military, in the Army, we would always tease the Air Force because
I've heard that before about the Air Force.
Yeah, you go out to there and they got their nice beds, they got AC in their tents, and we're struggling to even have anything in the field. Very fortunate, I was working in the telecommunications, and yeah, we would set up a tent, but our generators, we had to plug in our fans to keep cool in the 110-degree heat sometimes because of the desert or whatever situation we were in. But you just go and look at, I believe the comforts that we have often skew what we can do or can't do. Oftentimes we think, okay, we'll lose everything. And it's like, okay, what's next? These people haven't even experienced the cable television probably in their home that we get so used to. We get irritated because their internet's down, and they're probably irritated because they're trying to find some water and can't even find it.
Yeah. They don't have like a water faucet with a sink that you can just turn the water and clean water comes out. You can't walk into a room there. I mean, in some places you can, but in the most part for these camps, and really when you're out in the bush, you don't walk into a room and just flick a light switch. So all of these things, these creature comforts that we've created, and I'm glad we have, because I benefit from them when I'm here in the States. But over there, they don't have that. Cupboards full of food, clean drinking water coming out of the faucet, all of these things just not available.
When you think about the comforts of home, we think about here, we get stuck in our westernized mind. We pull up into a fast food restaurant, immediately get food. What is that aspect there? If you're having these thousands of people, is starvation high because of these encampments? And like you said, everybody's taking the piece of the pie.
Hmm.
What we
Hmm.
think we're funneling money to the UN should have food to these people. What you're saying that they're not even getting the food.
No. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, malnourishment is a huge problem in a lot of these camps. I've seen, truckloads pull up and deliver bags of rice. And of course, some of the bags will have a hole in them and some of the rice spills onto the ground. I've literally seen women, swarm where the rice has fallen onto the ground and pick the grains of rice out of the sand. That's how desperate the conditions are. And it's just rice. It's not like they have meat or even access to something like chicken. They're literally cooking rice, and they may have some kind of spice or herb or something that they'll mix in with the rice to give it some flavor. But if they can get a bowl of rice or a half a bowl of rice for one day, is probably a good meal for them.
When you think about where things are at, you're saying it's due to corruption. But Brad, I'm going to speak on the viewership here of how can you believe in God when you see this type of disparity? How can God really allow this to happen and allow this to happen to people? If he says he loves all people, why are they going through this then?
Yeah, that's an age-old question, isn't
For
it?
sure.
I honestly I don't probably have a good answer for that, but I know that I'll say this: they're not struggling to believe in God. The ones who are suffering, it's not. I've never heard a Nigerian say, why am I living in these conditions and why is this happening to us?" I think a lot of times God tries to teach us contentment. Contentment is a powerful thing, whether you're a Christian believer or not. To be content in whatever condition you're in and to learn to be thankful and grateful, there's a power. I've heard secular teachers give TED Talks on the power of gratefulness and how it can radically transform your
Oh, for
life.
sure.
And they're not even Christian believers. And so I think God teaches all of us in different ways, and we're all called to fulfill a certain calling in his great plan. So probably not a sufficient answer for that question. I wish I had a better answer, but I know that God loves every one of his creatures
You
and
know,
his
when I
creation.
and when I work with parents, in working with their kids, sometimes I'll handle them caterpillar that is coming out, or an illustration of a caterpillar coming out, and I would say, "Here's a pair of scissors. Are you going to help this butterfly out,
Mm,
or are you going to let it suffer?" And 80% would say, "I want to help it out." And I said,
yeah,
"Well, just killed it because it needs the endorphins of the struggle to make it fly."
that's right.
And oftentimes we always point to God as the parent of, "Well, you're punishing me," because how we view our own parents here is often how at times how we view our God.
Yeah.
But we forget to mention that there's a power that's been given over to a God of this world. And that's the one that comes to seek, destroy, and kill. And those are the things that we can become the victim and
Hmm.
sit and stay, why me? But you're right. When you think about our Western culture, it's great that you have this ministry to be able to help these people to change their life, not just in a physical but a spiritual sense too.
Yeah.
But Brad, we in the last segment, we're halfway through. I'm just thinking, what's going to happen with America with things that are happening? I mean, Minnesota, You have people running through the church and disrupting service there. That is a fundamental right of those who want to come worship was violated. But yet they say, there was an ICE person in there that how can they be a Christian and yet serve a government that it's the devil, so to speak? What do we need to be prepared for here in the United States?
Well, I think one going back, and I love your illustration of the caterpillar and the butterfly. I want to add to that and just say that there's a spiritual depth among people who are suffering, because I spend a lot of time with people who are suffering. There's a spiritual depth to them that you don't see in any other group of people. And that might just be the blessing that God is giving them. I wish I had the spiritual depth that they have. But you asked the question about, what's happening to our country? Where are we headed? And I can only speak to, I know that in northern Nigeria, 12 of the states are controlled by Sharia law. It never used to be this way in northern Nigeria. 20 years ago, Muslims and Christians lived side by side together in relative peace. It's only been within the last 20 years that Islam has been radicalized. And with that radicalization comes Islamic rule and Sharia law. Sharia law is, if you're a Muslim and you convert to Christianity, it's legal to kill you under the blasphemy laws of Sharia. This is the kind of law where if you get caught stealing, they cut off your hand. These are draconian laws. A woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's testimony. Women are considered property. These are antiquated ways of thinking and doing things. But what we see is that radical Islam is not content to assimilate. It only wants to dominate. And that's what's happened in northern Nigeria. Radical Islam has taken over and it's dominating northern Nigeria. Now, we see that in other parts of the world. We look at Sharia law spreading across the world like we've never seen it before. Back in 1980, there was one country that had Sharia law, Saudi Arabia. And fast forward to 40 years later, there's 139 countries around the world now that have Sharia law. Excuse me, I said 139. 64 countries have Sharia law now. So it's a major move across the globe. And what you see happening in Europe is sort of a canary in a coal mine. You have areas and major cities in Europe that are under Islamic rule. Parts of them are. They're called no-go zones. These are areas where first responders can't go in. Police officers can't enter into these areas because they're Islamic controlled under Sharia law. You have the UK recently adopted their arbitration laws, which allowed Sharia law to be used as precedents in their own legal system. That's a way that Sharia law and radical Islam is not assimilating to the culture that they're in, but dominating, that drive to take over. We see that happening here in the United States, and even in places like Minnesota and Dearborn, Michigan, even in parts of Texas, we hear about that happening, Texas of all places. But if you go back to 2009, there was a Superior Court judge in New Jersey that was hearing a case of a woman, a Muslim woman that accused her husband of abuse. And because under Sharia law, a woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's, the judge consulted the family's imam, and the imam ruled that the husband, that the wife should be returned to her husband and that there was no abuse. And the judge listened to that ruling of the imam and ruled in favor of the husband. Now, that case was ultimately overturned, but it just shows the volition that Islam has to not assimilate to the culture like historically has been done by other cultures that have come to the United States. They ultimately assimilate to the culture here, but to dominate the culture. And we see that happening in Europe. I always call it the canary in the coal mine to what's happening in the United States next.
No, I mean, that's a great illustration. And for those who are younger generation that doesn't understand the canary in the coal mine. Back in the day when there was non-equipment like with machinery that we have today, the pickaxes and things that they would go into the coal mines, they would carry canaries into the coal mine to alert them of gases. So if the bird stops breathing, they know to get out. And so it is a warning sign that's there. When you think about Nigeria and what's there, the devastation, you think about what's happening here in the United
Mhm.
States. Where do we go from here, Brad? When you think about, okay, it's just not just the Christian world, it's everybody. So if we just strip away the age, the sex, the religion, all of this together, it's human beings that are being persecuted by a one type law that just dictates everything. And so, what ways do you think that we can help our communities to thrive and not get to a position of being in a nomadic tribe of IDP camps?
I think one of the biggest things that's dividing us is we have resorted to becoming very tribalistic here in the United States without really even realizing that we're doing it. And I don't believe that Christianity is conducive with that kind of mentality. We're called to love everyone. And I think ultimately, love, real love, is the answer to all of the world's problems. And I happen, as a believer, and I'm also a messenger of the gospel of Christ, I believe that the answers to the world's problems are found in the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel of Jesus Christ has the answer to every problem that the world presents. It answers selfishness. It answers pride. It answers greed. It answers hate. It answers all of those things. And I think we just need to get back as Christians. Again, I can only speak as a Christian, I'll speak for Christians. We need to get back to the simplicity of the gospel of Jesus Christ and stop being so focused on the divisions and the tribalism. And I'm not saying that Christians shouldn't be involved in politics, but I think maybe Christians are too involved in politics. Paul talks about entangling yourself in the affairs of the world. That's happening to the church today. I think that there are times when politics intersects spiritual issues, and that's when Christians need to get involved.
Sure.
But I think it's a lot of times when that's not happening and Christians are getting involved. I think we just need to get back to being focused on God's love for us and our love for everyone else. That's really what the greatest commandment is, and the second greatest commandment. And Jesus Christ himself says, on this hangs all the law and the prophets.
When you think about what you're sharing, I want to translate this to those who are on the border or don't believe, whatnot. Whether you believe or not, today is a call of unity. We've been so divisive and thinking, well, you're a racist, you're this or you're that. When do we stop name calling? And this is a call to my Christian friends. The world has already been judged. Who are we to point out sin in our people that are not within the church? Our call is to love and to bring in. And that's what I love about being a therapist and working with my clients, is that they know that I'm a non-judgmental person. Yeah, right. I wear black, but I'm not a judge. And I like to take this phrase that James says, to confess your sin. And to me, sin is a judgmental term that God uses, right? And I want to say to everybody, really, that passage is saying it's time for us to confess our humanity. When we have compassion, empathy for one another, then we can come together and to share. And this is something totally different than what Sharia law is imposing.
Yes.
And when you think about what's happening, it is already here. It's what I call the frog in the kettle perspective. Frog in the kettle, you put a frog in a kettle with cold water, put the kettle on hot fire, and slowly that water becomes a boil, but the frog becomes acclimated and it dies because it's already hit them. We need to be able to be aware. And so, the work that you're doing, leaving a major congregation, a church, and getting into the trenches, the military, I always say the best officers are the ones who rose from their enlisted ranks because exactly what we went through, right? Brad, it's been a pleasure in being able to have this moment in the two podcasts.
Thank you.
Just to bring a light of what's happening, not only in our country, but in other countries that the cancer is there, so to speak, the black mold, however you want to describe it. And it's here in our backyard.
Yeah.
And so we're not wanting to cause fear. I don't want any fear mongering. It's just raising awareness to say, look, where are we heading?
Yeah.
Are we part of the problem or are we part of the solution so that we can come together as people and keep our 250 years from the next 250? Brad, God bless you in your work and being able to help these people who are having difficulty in helping themselves. Is there a book or a website or anything that you would like to point people to?
Yeah, the people can go to acrossnigeria.org and they can learn more about our organization and what we do. They can receive an email updates from us and other ways to connect with us. Acrossnigeria.org. Just go to our website and check it out.
And a lot of your stuff is transparent because, what you shared earlier is sometimes everybody gets a piece of the pie. Here, they're actually getting the pie and not a piece of it.
Yeah. We bring it to the field exactly where it needs to go. All of our resources, nobody takes a cut on its way down. So that's one of the beautiful things about micro organizations like ours is that we can actually deliver it to the people who need it. Yeah.
And what a wonderful ministry that is, Brad. And thank you so much. And so until next time,
thank you.
Take care. Thank you. God bless. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on Coach Soul. As we wrap up, we want to remind our listeners of a few key points. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not substitute professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content shared here is based on professional opinion but may not apply to everyone's situation. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your mental health care. If you're in a crisis, please seek immediate professional help or contact a crisis hotline. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship. For personal advice, please consult with your licensed mental health professional in your area. Remember, your mental health journey is unique. While we hope this information is helpful, it is crucial to work directly with the qualified personnel for your specific needs. Thank you again for tuning in to Coach Soul, and we'll see you next time.